Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities in Miniatures. Today I have a fun little release from Gripping Beast, actually GBP, I guess Gripping Beast Plastics. Anyway, we've got some late Roman Cataphracts, and as far as I know, as of the time that I filmed this at least, Gripping Beast are the only ones who really have any actual late Roman models available in plastic in around 28 millimeter size. I know there's always those little caveats that there's plenty in metal or in smaller scales perhaps, but these are the only ones that I know of in this size. And it's funny because even Gripping Beast themselves on their website recommend that these guys work just absolutely for the rule of cool. They're dudes in heavily armored, shiny, fancy horsemen, just decked out in armor with big honking spears. So where can you go wrong with that? Well, plenty in real life, because I mean they weren't exactly the most effective and didn't have the most endurance necessarily, but they obviously had a major impact in their use as heavy cavalry, as shock troops, what have you, and kind of the progenitors to the typical Western European knight look. So anyway, as I ramble on and pretend like I know what I'm talking about with history, I am not familiar with sword point. That is Gripping Beast's rule set, I guess. So we've got enough to build 12 horsemen. And I mentioned horses specifically because, well, each sprue, and they're all the same, each sprue has enough to build 3 horses, but each sprue also has 4 riders. So you are going to end up with a few extra bodies. Something to be aware of. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, especially if you end up having more extra horses for whatever reason, put them to use somewhere. We got some interesting looking helmets. Personally, I like the ones with the metal faceplates. We'll be using those for sure. Of course, I guess technically you could just paint them all as metal face masks. There is not a lot of variety in terms of poses, unfortunately. You have 2 riders that have their left hand down at the reins, it looks like, and they're going to be holding their spears, or contos, I believe were the names of these. And then you have 2 that are going to be holding it in a double-handed position, and then you've got 4 swords and scabbards. So I guess if you wanted to convert some up or chop down the spearheads, you could probably do a little bit of variation, but I mean, they look cool as it is. So other than that, it looks like we have 4 of these sprues, and then... Whoa. Okay, that's interesting. We have big base plates to mount them on. So it looks like we only have, I don't have any in here. I think the idea is to mount these 2 to a base. I guess so. I don't know about that. I'll hold on to those. Those might be handy for other things, but I like the idea of having my horsemen as individual riders. So, you know what? Sit tight. I'm going to put some together, and let's see how they turn out. Alright, well, that was weird. I put some together, and I built all 4 riders, but now I can't find one as I shake the table. Okay, horses. Pretty simple. A little bit of variation. I think I can't tell. It looks like they might all have the same pose, but I guess that's not the biggest, most horriblest thing out there in the world. Ooh, wow, exciting, right? I didn't feel like these were the most exciting models to look at under display in this kind of a situation, so I just went ahead and painted one. I couldn't help myself. And I gotta say, it was kind of fun. I really enjoyed it. Now, obviously, this was just a real quick paint job, but I tried to give it the cool flashy lance like on the box. Of course, my paint job is going to be nowhere nice as fancy or as the ones that the manufacturers have, unfortunately. But I feel like it did a pretty decent job. I mean, I'm just like slapping some paint on it. I think it looks cool. Did I do the greatest gluing job? No, not really, but that's okay. I think they have a very nice visual, very distinct look to them. Grabbing the only other mounted model I own, a hurriedly painted Albion Knight from Fireforge Games. So you can see the horse is a little bit smaller, riders are about the same size. Makes me curious if they are interchangeable. Oh, you know what? That's where the other body went. I stuck him on another project. Oh. Well, he'll show up soon enough, I'm sure, in a few days. But yeah, so outside of, you know, ridiculously sized models like the Varangard, I think he's going to look pretty decent with most historical cavalry. I think if you start using them in fantasy games, you might run into some size issues, but otherwise, it's a pretty cool looking model. The only downside is there's not a whole lot of opponents available in plastic for these guys to go impaling with their spears. I don't think, at least as of this moment, Gripping Beast makes any Goths or anything like that, but it looks like Wargames Atlantic might be doing something along those lines, but I mean, I guess if you use some of my generic medieval infantry here, my Frenchmen, good enough for me. The Dacian guy kind of looks like a Goth, maybe if I painted him differently and gave him a different shield. But I figure, you know what, if we want to ignore actual historical time periods, they might be kind of a fun unit to use along with some of my other various Roman soldiers here. So size-wise, if you're curious, I mean, he doesn't look as gigantic. I've heard stories that the Victrix cavalry is rather large, and actually for that purpose now I kind of want to get some, just to see if they're like all Age of Sigmar'd out or something. But at least for the time being, I think there's Cataphracts rules in SPQR from Warlord for, maybe it was the Macedonians. So I figure, you know what, we'll just run them as proxies. Why not, right? So that way we have something at least ready to go when the revised edition drops, and I'll have myself a nice unit of cavalry. So other than the fact, I guess my biggest complaint about this, like I said, is the fact that the posing is a bit limited, since you only, you know, there's only really one way to build each sprue of models, but they are quite cool looking. They have a very unique visual style. There's not a lot of models, if any others, whoops, there went a scabbard, in plastic. Again, that's the key word there. So I think if you're interested, at least for the time being, this is the only game in town if you want to get some late Romans in plastic. Grippy Beast also makes plastic late Roman infantry, which I might end up grabbing just to have for a nice cohesive set of models. We'll see. We'll put a link down below in case you guys have never checked out their website. Gripping Beast does have quite a bit of other plastics in the late Roman Dark Age era. They were one of the first to really hit that. And unfortunately, it's not super easy to get their stuff out here in the States. So it's something to keep an eye on. I know there's a few companies online that distribute their stuff, but they are kind of few and far between. And with the weather the way it is currently in the U.S., getting things from anywhere outside of the West Coast is kind of a hassle. So good luck to you in that regard. And hopefully everybody out there is trying to stay warm, especially my friends out there in Texas. I know it's been a rather sucky week, to say the least. With that said, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye.